welcome to Saturday morning on the Iconic Production YouTube channel. Our Iconic Production Twitch channel. It has been a while since we have been on here doing this, and we are just glad to be here with you and to kind of show you what we've got going on. We are going to be doing. We're going to be doing Exploring Glorantha on our Twitch channel going forward, just as a way to kind of increase the signal of the wonder of the world of Glorantha. Again, if you are joining us for the first time, this show is Exploring Glorantha. You can check us out on the Iconic Production YouTube channel. It is a show where Evan, who is my co-host, Evan, good to see you as always, and I'm JM, where we talk about the wonderful mythological setting of Glorantha that was created by, or discovered by, Greg Stafford many years ago, and has been the source of video games, role-playing games, novels, board games, war games, and was highly influential on video games. In fact, Ken Ralston, who did a lot of the work for Elder Scrolls and Tamriel, worked on Glorantha as well, and considered Glorantha to be kind of his North Star. So that's where we're at. We're going to be doing these on our Twitch channel going forward, kicking them over to YouTube. If you like what you do, we do, please consider subscribing here on Twitch or following us on YouTube. And yeah, so we're going to get into it. So today is our first episode of 2022. It's hard to believe we have been doing this as long as we have. This was a passion project that Evan and I kind of kicked around and talked about how, hey, we're going to do this someday. Someday we're going to do this. And you know what? It just worked out that we were able to, and very glad for that. Before we get started, two quick announcements. Chaosium Con is going on in April, and Evan and I will be there. Hopefully we'll be able to get you some exclusive interviews and maybe some discussions behind the scenes. And just a big thanks to the president of Chaosium, Rick, for he's going to do an interview with us here that we're going to release on our YouTube channel. So if you're following us, you'll be able to see that. And then he is a fan of Exploring Glorantha and heard me lamenting the fact that I had been yet to be able to find the Pavis and Big Rubble Gloranthan Classics yellow book that sits right there, and he was gracious to reach out and say, hey, I've got an extra copy if you would like one. And so I was able to chat with him about that and got it, and it's signed, Evan. So I'm doing everything I can to make my co-host jealous. Hey, Becca, good to see you. Welcome to the channel. I realize it's going to be sort of a new way of doing this for us, so please bear with us as we get our feet under us. So today, blitz through our announcements and let's get to the meat of our discussion today. Today we're starting a multi-part series on the elder races of Glorantha. You could consider them analogs to sort of the elder races of any F20 game. So elves and dwarves and trolls. John, I really hope you're here when we do the troll episode. We're going to be talking about these because they form a foundation. They're one of the layers of the onion of Glorantha. Even though primarily you're going to play as humans, if you're starting with RuneQuest Glorantha, you're most likely playing as Sartorites or as Rolians, or maybe Praxians. The existence of the elder races is the foundation that the human civilizations are built on. And so we've talked a lot about the mythologies and why they're useful, and we're going to kind of take that into our discussion of the elves and the dwarves and the trolls of Glorantha, because, again, the purpose of the show is to make sure that you can find something gameable and useful today and implement it into your Glorantha campaign. So we're going to start with looking at the first of these elder races, which are close to my heart. I love the Aldryami. I love the Elves of Glorantha. And if you were thinking love with the sea, love with the stars, ancient race of mystical wisdom, throw all of that out, because Glorantha Elves, Greg took twists on all of kind of the classic fantasy races. And so I'll start in here, and then I'm going to kick over to Evan for our first part here. But out of the starter box, there's this quote: although humans are currently the dominant sentient species in Glorantha, the elder races still have great power. The elder races of Glorantha predate the appearance of humans in the world. They include many small, strictly local, or otherwise insignificant creatures. The following are powerful enough to dominate significant parts of the world, though some live alongside humankind. So think they're there. They were once greater, but they're not gone. And in fact, a lot of the stories that take place in the timeline that we're in RuneQuest Glorantha, we're going to start seeing the Elder Races playing a much larger role than they have maybe for an age of the world. So, Evan, I realize I just monopolized the first 6 minutes of our episode. Why don't you give us an overview? What makes a Gloranthan elf different than the elves that we have seen in any other F20 supplement, going all the way back to the start of roleplay, maybe even fantasy? I mean, right, elves and Tolkien sort of go hand in hand. So give us an overview on why Gloranthan elves are cool and why they're different.
Yeah. So, and even going to the progenitors of Tolkien's ideas, back to Germanic and Celtic mythology, the elves of Glorantha, the Aldryami, are plants. They are they have the man rune, that is all these sort of bipedal sentient creatures, trolls, dwarves, elves. They have the man rune, this form of that makes them like a copy of the gods in some ways, but eventually becoming mortal. But they are they predate the creation of sort of the fleshy, what they consider the fleshy beings. They are from the first growth during the God's Age, when plants blanketed the cosmic mountain, and they were called forth to be the sentient guardians of the forests and caretakers of the plants, and they are of the same kingdom as the plants. They are walking, talking plants, and that makes them very different, and their perspectives very different. They want to be in harmony with the world of plants and everything that supports them.
So would you say that if Tolkien leaned into the Germanic origins of elves, that Greg's take on it is far more like Greek, like ancient Greek myths, where the spirits of the trees and the trees have a much more active role? So like in the dryads of ancient Greece, or some of those sort of woodland spirits that have a much stronger tie to an elemental tree form.
Yeah, I think that's right, and there is a lot of spirit identity between the elves and woodland and plant spirits. It's all part of the community, the spirit world, the physical world, in the kingdom of plants. That's where the elves live, and it is a callback to that more ancient sense of the mythological explanation of the world.
Now, if I may interrupt real quick, there is so right now we're pulling a lot of this information from old supplements. We're pulling it from the Guide to Glorantha. We're pulling it from the Gloranthan source book, both of which are available from Chaosium. And a little bit from the source book, a little bit from the RuneQuest Glorantha bestiary. But there is a manuscript in the works, is what it sounds like. And so hopefully, we may be able to get some more elf information, like official elf information, coming down the pipeline in the future. It is a good time to get into Glorantha because Chaosium is really putting a lot of time and effort in making sure the line is vital, it's alive, and it's much like the Elves of Glorantha growing as it kind of moves forward.
That's right. And I think we need to shout out the author, the person who announced that manuscript, and turning in a manuscript to Chaosium is still a very long distance from its publication. There's a lot that has to go through, particularly for a small press like Chaosium. But Shannon Appelkline is a name that if you haven't heard, you should know if you exist in the tabletop role-playing space, because not only is he the foremost expert on Gloranthan elves, and he's published a lot, particularly on Facebook, in a group called Glorantha Fans. But over the years, he worked closely with Greg Stafford. He's written a lot on the elves, and he is also perhaps one of the foremost historians of the tabletop role-playing industry, and has written a multi-part history called Designers and Dragons,
which is fantastic. If you have not read that, just big shout out. It's well worth the read if you want to kind of see the origins and the developments of this hobby that we love.
Yeah. So he's phenomenal on multiple levels, but I've looked at a lot of the things that he's written over the years to help us start to get a handle on things. But eventually, what his announcement is, the intent is that there will be a very gameable supplement, possibly, a callback to the old box sets like Troll Pack back in the 80s, but an elf pack. I'm not sure what they'll actually call it, but they might call it that. I
don't know, you may be barking up the wrong tree there, Evan. It could be a completely... Should I leave these puns alone?
Please.
Yeah. So let's talk about the types of elves. So like in sort of Tolkien-esque fiction, you tend to have, right, the high elves, the wood elves, the dark elves, although those sort of have different connotations in gaming than they do in sort of like the Tolkien-esque fiction, where the dark elves are just the elves who have not gone to see the light of the trees. But in Glorantha, we have a wildly different view of elves, and I love it because elves are categorized by the types of trees that they grew out of, that they have an association with. So you have, I'm going to let Evan do all of our pronunciations today, but you have the red elves, and these are the fern and moss elves. Evan, you want to give us the in-world name for that?
Sure, the Slorfings. Again, and the Slorfings, track sort of the development of plant creation along a timeline, which of course is fraught in the gods' time, because everything sort of happened at once, but it also can be lined up in a sequence for mortals to be able to understand. So the red elves, they're like not true elves. They're not from trees. They're from these other. They're like a cousin of the true elves. But the first plants are these ferny, swampy plants that arise out of the merger of water and earth and things, and so they're sort of the progenitors of plant people.
Right, and then you move into the Vronkali, the green elves, which are kind of your conifer elves, if you will, and then after them, kind of very quickly come the really? Did I do it? Morelli?
I'd say Morelli.
Morelli. All right.
I won't claim, I'm no Shannon Appelkline. Let's just say that.
Shannon, if you're watching, comment in the chat or in the on the YouTube comments and correct our pronunciation. And those are the deciduous elves that kind of come. So the first one comes into being when the Elf King, the High King of the Elves, sort of is established. And then when Yelm ascends into the sky and there's actually sunlight, then you have sort of the deciduous elves, the brown elves, kind of coming into existence. And then Evan, why don't you talk about the kind of the last ones, that the yellow elves?
Right. So this is the broadleaf plants, the like palm trees and things that more tropical growth, and you get the Mbili, the yellow elves. And I should say these color identifications. Greg Stafford noted that this is another inheritance from the God Learners, which I know we'll have to.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a whole episode on the God Learners this summer,
if not multiple. But the
Cursed
God
be their
Learners
name.
were these sort of quasi-scientific sorcerers. They wanted to categorize everything, to understand it, to put it in boxes, so that they could understand and control things in the mythological age. Anyway, so it's not that elves are yellow or green or red necessarily, but it is this identification. So the yellow elves are the tropical elves, the elves of tropical jungle forests and of that nature. And then there are other plant people that are also related, but they come later in the mythological sequence.
Well, and let's just take a pause here, and I've thrown up the art from the Glorantha bestiary of the elves, and can we just talk about how great these images look? Especially the beech tree elf is just gorgeous. I love that with the autumn like hair that's just kind of cascading down her back, almost like a cloak of leaves. Chaosium has really taken a lot of the. I mean, we've always had good art for Glorantha. We had amazing art in the Guide to Glorantha, where the moon design people really just kicked it up a notch. But then they're taking it even another step farther as we're getting into this new age of RuneQuest Glorantha. And if you're a fan of Chaosium, they put out a 2-book monster book for Call of Cthulhu. And I believe it's the same artist that is going. That one artist did all of the art for that book, and they tapped that artist to do all of the art for the Gods and Cults of Glorantha book that is going to be coming out. And it's going to be another 2-volume book, and I'm just so excited to see more art like this coming to life, because, let's be honest, we do judge books by their covers, and we judge books by the art that's inside, and Chaosium is constantly improving the quality of their books.
I want to put a little caveat on that. I think that the lead artist is the same artist, and he is illustrating each of the deities.
Okay.
There has been a lot of art posted by at least one other artist that has done sort of a big, like the sort of things that you would see in a big fresco in a temple, to tell the whole story of
like the God's Wall or something like that.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. I think the conceit is that it's sort of in the main temple in Boldholm, perhaps, that tells different stories of Orlanth and the Red Goddess and everything. Anyway, that art I understand is
a different artist.
In the Gods,
yeah,
and it's a different, fantastic artist.
Yeah,
the level of attention to detail is going to be phenomenal. And those books are supposed to come out this year. They will cover, of course, Aldryami, the mother goddess of forests and elves. So we're going to be learning more.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about Aldryami and Flamel, who I have a deep and abiding love for, and we can talk about that when we get to there in a second. But let me ask you a question, Evan. So the show is about getting new people into Glorantha and exposing people to new concepts. And again, keeping it at the fun level, right? This is not uh, Glorantha 401. This was like
Right.
Glorantha 101.
Yes.
So I can hear people now, probably Becca because she's watching, going, but Evan, if there are elves and there are dwarves, elves and dwarves hate each other. Is that something that exists in Glorantha? And if so, what is the cause of this enmity? So,
Yeah. Well, that would be an excellent question, and I should say, that the elder races all distrust and hate one another because of ancient rivalries that happened all the way back to God time. But the particular thing that happened between the elves and the dwarves was that the dwarves see themselves as having preceded the elves. They are the servants of the world machine, which is Mostal, their god, but they impersonalize him, and see him as the perfect operation of the world. And plant growth was not part of the dwarves' plan. And in fact, as the cosmic mountain is blanketed with forests, they saw that as an infestation. And in order to correct the running of the machine, they wanted to eradicate it. And then, of course, the elves saw the dwarves as despoilers of
mm-hmm,
this, perfect, beautiful Eden-like garden. And ultimately, their great hero, High King Elf, the first Vronkali green elf, um, invaded the heart of the world machine. And there are a couple of different stories, as you would expect in Glorantha, where all the mythological stories are true, even
mm-hmm,
when they contradict one
mm-hmm,
another. But there's no question that after Yermal used death, Humacht used death, a number of others, such as Orlanth, used
mm-hmm.
death. High King Elf also took the power of death. He took it to the heart of the world machine, and he severed the main operating part of the machine, essentially killing Mostal, fundamentally breaking the world machine, and also killing Mostal's brother, Stone, which used to be a much more a live thing. Now it's cold and dead. Why? Because the elves killed Stone. This is an ancient crime that the Mostalis hold against it. Of course, the elves have their own sense of hatred
Mm-hmm.
and many resentments against the dwarves, and these are crimes that continue um, to motivate deep hatreds and distrusts between the two peoples.
Well, and then you also have the fact that right when the elves have a hatred and an intense distrust of the humans as well, because right, Orlanth kills Yelm, which causes the darknesses, which cause vast swaths of forest to die. And then when time starts and forests kind of spread out in the first age and the elder races have their time, we're now in the third age, right? The time of the first council is gone, the time of the second council is gone, when the races kind of worked together. And what we now have is the Lunar Empire is burning two healthy forests to the ground to create more room for them. Even in Sartar, there is a human need for lumber, and so the elves, again, much like in other fantasy games, have a reason to be violent and interact with the humans because the humans are slowly constraining and restricting their power. Now in Dragon Pass, this is sort of where when I first encountered elves, um, and kind of recognized that they were so different was actually when I was doing the Hero Quest, back when it was Hero Quest and not Quest Worlds, right? The Kingdom of Sartar campaign. Like it opens with the wedding hero quest of Ernalda and Flamal, where the seeds of the earth are renewed each year, and the new harvest and the new growth, and that kind of ties into kind of our mythic sense of the Elves of Glorantha. So, Evan, can you give us a brief overview of kind of the main mythological touchstones for the elves? And then we'll talk a little bit about the elves themselves, and then go into why they're cool, why they're gameable, and how players and GMs can use them.
Yeah. So we do start with Flamal, the father of plants, who in in various myths he's paired with different goddesses, but his child is Aldryami,
Mm-hmm.
the primal forest goddess and the patron of all true elves, and that spreads out on the cosmic mountain, the spike, and there is the Green Age, and the different elves, the red, the green, the brown, and yellow, come forth. They have their conflict with the Mastali, and they conceive of the elves themselves, and we still have a limited internal perspective of what the elves project, because we don't have that deep book that's just in draft form of their own psychology, but they see the universe balance between the grower, which brings a beautiful Eden-like green age, and the taker, which starts to cut down forests, to destroy things, to produce fire. Ultimately, when the world goes dark, the humans start to burn stuff because they're terrified and they need light and heat, but they're taking from the forest. So there's the taker and there's the grower, and the Mastali represent the takers. Humans very often are the representatives of the taker. Eventually they find balance, that there is a cycle between growing and taking that they have to reconcile themselves to. They kill the world machine to protect themselves, but Yelm is murdered.
Yeah, and then let me jump in here. One of the other interesting things about the elder races is the dwarves. Well, not your Warhammer dwarves, where it's a grudge on you and a grudge on you and a grudge on you. The Mastali do have a lot of pent up dwarf rage, and so Evan, let's take us just as we're talking about this. Let's also talk about the elder race's vulnerability to iron,
Right.
and because the elves of Glorantha are not fey, neither are the trolls of Glorantha fey. There's really no sort of feyness about them, yet they carry with them this vulnerability to iron that most of us would associate with like the realms of fairy or something like that. So as we're talking about these myths of the grower and the taker, how does iron figure into this?
Sure. Well, we were just getting to that point of the story.
Excellent.
So, excellent question. So, Orlanth kills Yelm. I think it's fair to say he murders him.
I don't think it's killed. He flat out just murders the king of the universe. Yeah.
But boy, he showed him. Anyway, so Yelm goes to hell, and bringing in all his blazing and terrible glory, pushing the creatures of darkness out onto the surface. So the trolls show up, and we've talked a little bit about them, and we'll go into more depth soon. But basically, they're the hungry people, and they like to eat everything. They like to eat elves. They like to eat dwarves. Boy, do they like to eat dwarves.
Dwarves are tasty. That is a troll fact.
That's right. So the dwarves, now beset, and deeply resentful of the elves, and terrified and deeply resentful and hateful of the dwarves, of the trolls.
Mm-hmm.
The dwarves realize that they need an ultimate weapon to help them, and they create iron. And iron they make poisonous and deadly to elves and trolls. They're sworn enemies. later on, they are deeply regretful that they didn't also make it
Yep.
poisonous to humans, because humans were just sort of pests at that time, but they grew in strength later
Mm-hmm.
on, and if they had known they were going to be such a problem, they would have also made it poisonous to humans, but they didn't.
Well, I love that little fact is part of the Mastali mythology. That if only we had known, we would have definitely made this poisonous to these things too.
Yeah.
Whether it's true that they could have, we don't know. But it
Right.
is a lament of the Elder Age that they didn't make it like deadly to humans as well.
Right. Well, and again, being Glorantha, it could be both true and not true, and true, both valid. So, yes. So elves and trolls do not use iron.
Mm-hmm.
Iron, in pure game mechanics in RuneQuest, it does double damage to them if for whatever penetrates armor. They can't abide it. They can't touch it. They can't. They can't use it, and it actively harms, injures, and poisons them. So. In the lesser darkness, as all of these grudges, as death is unleashed and all of these grudges have come out, the elder races are very much concentrating on killing one another
Mm-hmm.
for various crimes, real and imagined. Um, and then chaos comes, and everybody realizes slowly that
Yeah.
what the elves see as oblivion, even worse than death, than the taking, than the cycle which they've reconciled themselves to. Chaos represents utter annihilation, and so eventually everybody gets on the same page. We have the Lightbringer's quest, and even the hatreds of the elder races are put aside in order to face and defeat chaos in something called the I Fought We Won battle, as well as the Lightbringer's quest and the rebirth of the sun and the sacred compact of that results in the beginning of time.
Yeah. So, Evan, thank you. That was very succinct and delving into what is. Obviously, if you have learned anything from the Exploring Glorantha podcast, we're staying here. But you can pick any inch of ground in the world and just dig down. I think there's a wonderful video with John Wick, the game designer, who was like, "Well, this world is too big." So when he came to Glorantha, he was like, "I'm gonna learn about one thing. I'm just gonna learn about the red goddess, the lunar goddess." And he's now got like a multi-hundred page, I think, journal that he has kept just on notes about the red goddess. And it's because of the way that Greg very generously opened his world to everyone. When you find something interesting, know that there is someone else who found it just as interesting, probably dozens of people, and they have just drilled down and expanded that. So let's talk about elves. As you can see from the picture, they are not like your F20 elves. Some have leaves for hair, some have bark-like patterns for skin. They grow weapons and armor and tools. Well, they'll use bronze. They tend to prefer to grow their things. They are vegetarians. The thing that actually really caused me to, we'll call it, bond with the Elves of Glorantha is the fact that they have this thing called elf sense. And elf sense is by touch, they can detect the emotional and health state of a target. What it needs, like physically, does it need? Is it in pain? Is it stressed? Is it wounded? What is the soil like around here? And at the time that I came to Glorantha, I also came to like the Thomas Covenant Chronicles by Stephen R. Donaldson, and health sense is a big part of that. The ability to see and experience the health of the world and the land. And for me, that's my main touchstone on why I think the Elves of Glorantha are cool. If you think Treebeard is cool, the elves, and I love Treebeard and I love the Ents, Elves are even cooler in Glorantha. They are the living personification of the living, growing world. They're active defenders, but they're also the tenders of the forests and the plants. They care deeply about the health of the world. And that's, in my mind, why you will get a lot of mileage out of putting elves into your game. Gloranthan elves, the Aldryami, are so alien to the human experience. But there's this conservatorship, there's this love of the natural world, and a deep, deep link to the natural world that allows you to have them be both antagonists, right? If your Tula needs more wood, well, you're going to have to go deal with, the elves of the forest. But also, when the brew come down, the brew are going to destroy everything. So maybe you can go out and get aid. If you want something inhuman, yet still relatable, and still have things that, like when we talk about dragon newts, the dragon newts are so alien that even when you're interacting with them, you have no clue what's actually going on. The elves are one step removed from human, but still, they're not just humans with pointy ears. Like, I mean, look at the art. Also, who would not want to play again, that beach elf? I just love that beech tree elf art. So yeah, this is sort of how I would use them in the game. Evan, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I would just like to interject. Anybody who watches this video who has artistic talent and would like to add to the repertoire of interpretations of elves, perhaps you love trees and plants and things, and want to turn that in to pictures, please start doing that, because beach elf is great, but let's have lots more different kinds of tree people. That would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
So that's just my pitch to the fan community. Go forth and let 1,000 Aldryami flower.
Well, and if you do that and you would like us to show off your art,
absolutely
send an email to the Iconic Production info. You can find that. We'll put it in the show notes. And we'd love to show it off and talk more about the elder races. I mean, we're going to be talking about the elder races probably for the next 2 or 3 shows. We've got to cover the Mastali, we've got to cover the trolls, we've got to cover kind of generally everyone else. I'd love to do one on the dragon newts, but I think we could just sit here and not string together coherent sentences and do the dragon newts justice. So Evan, we're in our last segment here.
Yeah.
What would you say for let's start with players. So I kind of gave my idea of why I think the elves are cool. For you, why are the elves cool? Why should players and GMs stop and take a look at them and considering adding them into their game?
Yeah. Well, like you said, they are this fundamental part of the natural world, the healthy growing land, but also part of the forbidding forest. One of the things that makes a forest scary is that there are elves there, elves and their kin, and if you're not on the right side of them, you never want to face the elves in their own forest. They are one with the forest. They can sense everything in the forest. There is a communication, a song that passes among the trees and the plants of an elf forest. So they should be strange, alien, scary,
Mm-hmm.
but also persuadable. You have a difficult challenge convincing them that you will treat them fairly and not randomly cut down their trees and things. Humans have a bad reputation, and forget it if you're a troll or a dwarf, absent needing to unite to stop some horrible thing like chaos, they're probably not going to go for them. But humans, they might work with. So why are they cool? Well, they are so strange and different, and yet relatable that they have goals that can be in cooperation with humans. They want to spread the forest. They know that their power has waned greatly, but and they know that they can be overwhelmed by humans, but by cooperating with them, they can come to an accommodation and do things. There are forests that have been taken over by trolls. There are forests and natural places that have been taken over by chaos. They would cooperate with humans to try to reclaim parts of those things. So if you're from a background where the trolls are the ancestral enemies of your tribe or clan, elves are more likely to be your friends. If there's a troll infested wood and you need to leverage help against it, making alliances with the elves makes sense. They have their own agenda. They want to come back. They want to spread forests and their sense of harmony and care for the land. They're not into cultivation. But they understand it. They can be approached through earth cults, Arnalda, Esrola, at Flamal, of course. But they have their own twists on the myths. But they don't want to eat you, and they don't want to reprocess you like a dwarf.
That is true. That is true. So there are some benefits. Now, again, I'll just toss out, like, in Glorantha, there are always exceptions. So Evan's like, well, elves are good allies against the trolls. Well, that's mostly true, as Evan would be quick to point out. And if you are a patron of Iconic Production, we post the outlines, or we will be posting the outlines for our show notes. And what I need to let you guys know is that when we write our show notes, we routinely get to like 7 to 8 pages, which we can't just cover in an hour. So as a patron, you'll get all of the additional things that Evan and I put together. Evan put together the outline for this episode and did all of the heavy lifting, and it is wonderful. But there's also some of the exceptions are elves that are sort of elves, but also sort of not. They're relatives of the elves. So, like, the Vorlons are fungus elves, and they love the trolls. You have the Murthoi, the blue elves, which are like seaweed elves. They live under the sea. I will let you fill in the rest of the song. But there's this idea that just like plants all have, that the plants of Glorantha are alive and vital in a way that to our kind of modernistic, materialistic worldview seems very strange. And for me, that's the thing to lean into with the elves, with the elder races as a whole. The idea of they are not just humans with different height or different exterior characteristics. In Glorantha, they are wild and they are weird. And one of the best parts about this new RuneQuest in Glorantha, or RuneQuest Glorantha series, is that in the bestiary, and we're going to point you guys to, constantly point you back to RuneQuest as kind of the flagship game right now, there are rules for playing Aldryami adventurers. And so you can play as brown or green elves. In fact, in my RuneQuest game, we actually had an elf for a small portion of time in the game who journeyed with them. And so, Evan, because we have these rules, let me ask you this. Why should someone coming out of this podcast or looking at Glorantha go, why would I want to play an elf?
Well, you would want to play an elf if you are oriented towards elvish goals, towards you know protecting the land, reclaiming forests, um, uh, being in the cycle of life
Hmm.
and death. I think even more so, shamanism is sort of a weird thing for most human cultures. The shaman is sort of a insider outsider now on the plains of Prax, and with the Sunshin animal people,
Hmm.
shamanism is more central. But for the cultures that we're experiencing in RuneQuest Glorantha as sort of the core to introduce us, they are theistic, polytheistic cultures.
Hmm.
Orlanth and Ernalda, and shamans are sort of strange, interesting, possibly dangerous, possibly helpful, but shamanism is at the center of what
Hmm.
the elvish religions do, and Aldryami priests and priestesses um, are shamans as well, because the spirits of the plants and the plant people
Hmm.
cycle through the underworld and back into life. And so it's all a continuity. And so having that different perspective of the balance of life and death, growing and taking, um, is a different perspective. And they are in community with life and death all at the same time, where that division for humans is a little bit more stark. Yes, you pick certain ancestors that you propitiate and that you venerate, etc., but you exist in the world of the living. But the Aldryami see it a little bit differently. So if you want to experience sort of that, now if your elf is an adventurer, they're going to be different.
Hmm.
Um, and there are certain things that they have to stay in communion with their forest, even if they've left it. Elves can now depart for a while, but they need to be part of that community. And if they sever themselves, then they become what's called rootless, and they can become mad. They might be. There are elvish heroes that have become rootless that nonetheless continue to serve their community, um, but they lose their ties to the
Hmm.
cycles, etc. And then there are some that just they go their own way, and they might become adventurers as being rootless. So you might want to play that outlaw.
Hmm.
It's like an outlaw, but an outlaw that can really almost never go back because they've
Right.
lost that connection to the elvish song. So there are a lot of rich stories. That's
Yeah.
probably what I should have opened with. There are a lot of rich stories to be told as an Aldryami adventurer. um, Green elves are sort of the obvious choice because they don't hibernate in for several seasons, whereas the brown elves do. The brown elves never sleep, but they hibernate over the winter months. The green elves have a period of rest, um, a stillness that takes them on a daily cycle, but they are active year round, and so they are the real protectors,
Hmm.
because the forest, when it is sleeping, when it is going through that cycle of near death in the winter, they need protectors of the conifers. The evergreens are ever watchful for
Yeah.
them. So
Now, if you're a GM, there are several elf, I won't say elf focused, but there are several uh, elf adjacent adventures that are already been published. So if you have the Game Master Screen adventure book, which is something we're going to talk about with Rick, the president of Chaosium, when we talk about when we do our interview with him. There's an adventure. There's an elf in the Dragon of Thunder Hills, which is just a fantastic encounter. And then the Smoking Ruins, um, in the Grove of Green Rock, there is an elf NPC that is very central to that adventure. We won't go into it because I don't want to spoil that for any players that are listening. But that kind of can help you set a touchstone for what elves are like. And again, I think for me as a GM, um, I used elves very sparingly in my campaign. One, because the focus was on the Tula and the community that the humans were building there. But also, I don't ever want the elder races to feel so familiar that they feel just like humans in a rubber mask, if that makes sense, right? The trolls are always strange because they'll just pick up anything and eat it. And they have these runtlings that run around, the trollkin. And we're going to talk about, I know in the Gloranthan timeline, we should probably talk about the Mistali next, but we have a patron who is a massive fan of the trolls, and so our episode in February will be on the trolls. So again, John, hope you're able to make it for that. We'll let you know in the chat when it's going live. But Evan, can you give us a look at, is there anything in the Johnstown Compendium that if a GM is like, I really want even more elf in my game, is there something out there that they could use?
Yeah, so there's two supplements that have been produced that are elf oriented. I think they're affordable. The first is one called A Tale of Woodcraft, which is another little adventure where the elves play a central role, much like in the adventure in the Smoking Ruins. Although I'm sure that the details are much different, but it has to do with the relationship between humans and elves in a particular area, and how fraught that might be. And then the other was one of the Monster of the Month publications, and it's a focus on giving you a completely fleshed out or planted out, shall we say, Rune Master, a Wood Lord of Aldryami, and the title of that publication is Inval Tallspear. They completely stat out and provide background notes for this Aldryami Rune Master, and then provide some additional supports, elvish trinkets, and some additional side characters, including other elves and creatures from elvish forests. So there are other plant creatures. The principal are the spirits of trees made flesh, the dryads, which play a very important part in elvish culture. Then there are these little bush creatures that are elves are to trees as these things. The runners are to bushes, and then there are pixies and sprites that are little flower and weed creatures that fly and flit around and are like pixies and sort of fey pixies, but the plant version.
Right.
And those are things that you're going to encounter in the woods, and they stat out and talk about using that in this very affordable little publication from.
Yeah, and if you can find it, the Sartar Companion for Hero Quest, which we can only hope they will reprint when Quest Worlds comes out. And Quest Worlds is going to be, I believe this year is going to be the big year for Quest Worlds returning. I don't know if they have plans for linking it back with the Hero Quest side of things, but when we have more information, we'll definitely let you know. But the Sartar Companion has a lot of information on Elvish encounters within Dragon Pass as you're heroes are going around doing their adventuring thing.
Yeah, and there is a link between that one. I think one of the encounters there is with Tarndisi, the Dryad, who features very much in the Dragon of Thunder Hills as well.
Adventure, yeah.
And so they're caring for these characters. I should mention one thing that we didn't hit upon, but elves are long lived. The green elves lived for hundreds of years, a little bit longer than the brown elves, who still live hundreds of years, again tied to the kind of tree.
Yes.
And you can imagine, there are ancient redwoods in Glorantha, and those rare redwood Aldryami are very ancient and
Mm-hmm.
may even remember back to God time. Certainly, Tarndisi in these adventures remembers back at least to the Second Age, when Dragon Pass was very different. She remembers the God Learners. She remembers the Empire of Worms Friends. So this is another reason to involve your players with them. Elves have a different sense of time
Mm-hmm.
and a different understanding of the space and the natural world. And if you need to feed them some information, like the elves maybe know it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, in that way, they can help create a familiar touchstone for fantasy players coming from other genres. I mean, that is essentially what happens in Rivendell when the groups, when the Fellowship reaches the last homely house, and Elrond is like, well, I remember not just this, but then this and this, going back all the way to the first age.
Right.
So that is our overview. And again, when we say overview, we are water skimmers on the pond of Glorantha. Like there is so much more we could have talked about. But we again try to keep these to an hour so that they're digestible. You can listen to it over the month and go, all right, sweet. Here's what's next. Now, speaking of what's next, 2022 is going to be a very exciting year for us at Iconic Production. We're launching several new shows. I will talk about those later because we're going to do an announcement video for our patrons first. So if you'd like to find out what we have coming up here starting next week, consider becoming a patron of the Iconic Production. You can find us at patreon.com/Iconic Production. You can find links in the down below, both here on Twitch and on YouTube. If you like what we do, consider following us here on Twitch and on YouTube and subscribing. We are very thankful to our patrons and to all of our subscribers who help us produce more content like this. And again, we're going to have an interview with the president of Chaosium talking about Glorantha and the Upland Marsh and the Ducks and Delectably the Necromancer and what's coming down the line, and even just a more retrospective look at how, when Glorantha went out of print, how did the fan community keep it alive until we've hit this new renaissance, if you will. And I know I'm paraphrasing what it was called in the back, the Glorantha back time. The Glorantha Renaissance, we're experiencing another renaissance, and it's really thanks to the fans. So when you look at the Johnstown Compendium, that's really a continuation of this fan support that existed for this world, even when it wasn't in print or in publication. So we're going to have new shows coming out for Iconic. Again, patrons get access to that first. If you like what we do here, and again, if you join the Patreon, we have a Discord server. We're active on that. We post the show outlines to everyone. We post behind-the-scenes things. We're always available to hang out and chat. But that's kind of where we're going to bring it to an end for today. Next month, we're going to be talking about the trolls, the the ooze, however you choose to pronounce it. Your Glorantha will vary, and that applies to pronunciations as well. Evan, any final things before we sign off for this month's Exploring Glorantha?
Step into the forest and listen for its song.
Yes. Listen to the health of the world around you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's great healing and great wisdom among the trees.
Yeah. Evan, thank you for preparing the outlines. I think I'm going to lean into your expertise for the elder races, because you have just such an intense and deep knowledge of this. I just bring excitement. But until next time, stay safe, stay gaming, stay healthy. I am JM. Evan is my host here with me on Exploring Glorantha. We will see you next month. We're going to try and do it the third Saturday morning of every month so that we have a nice regular scheduled program for you. And if you're watching this on YouTube, consider watching on Twitch on the third Saturday of every month. We go live at 10 Central. and we'll be back in 1 month with the Trolls, and we'll be back earlier than that with a special interview with the president of Chaosium. So until next time, have a great one.
We are all us.
We are all us.